Round two.
Episode 2, roundtable discussion of AI stuff. The blog article being released is all about MCP servers.
Oh, it's my favorite topic.
Demystifying it. And you said something the other day that kind of blew my mind. That, about 6 months ago, there was only like 1,000 MCP servers. And today there's over 15,000. And at that rate, by end of the year, we're going to have tens of thousands of MCP servers. But
yeah.
Here's the thing. Just about every single conversation I have when I bring up MCP server, no one knows what it is.
Yeah. So model context protocol,
Yeah.
it's not really a server. What it is when you have a chat with AI, specifically a large language model.
Yeah.
What we discovered really early on is the biggest problem is injecting into the context data that's useful for the AI to give you a good answer. So if you want to have a conversation about an email, you don't just ask the question, you ask the question, and then on the back end, there's technology that goes into your email and pulls the email out and puts it in behind the scenes so that the AI can read it, and then it reads your question, and then it gives you an answer based on that. Anytime the AI is using any kind of data or interacting with any other system, there needs to be injection of data into the context. And doing that becomes this game of trying to fit the right, because the context windows for the AI are limited. So you can only fit so much information into one prompt, or it just doesn't work. And so it becomes this game of figuring out how do you get the right data summarized into the context so that you can give the AI the information it needs to give the user, the human, the answer that the human is looking for out of the data. So we started building our own, we called them connectors back before anybody really had a name for it.
Yeah.
But one of our big cases was Jira. And our Jira issues describe the coding work that we do, and they can get really big, a big description, a lot of attachments, tons of comments. And so we had to build mechanisms to summarize that stuff down so that when the user asks, hey, give me an answer on this. So we built this chunking thing so that the AI would read part of it and summarize the important information, and read more of it and summarize the important information, and read more of it and extract the meaningful facts, and then inject that into a prompt so that when the user says, what's the status of this Jira, that the AI can say, developer A worked on it, developer B tested it, it looks like it's good, QA is currently working on it. But all of that requires that you get information out of the other system and inject just enough of it to give the AI the information it needs to answer the question. So a bunch of people worked at OpenAI, and they left OpenAI to go to another company called Anthropic. Claude. The Anthropic people built Claude, which are amazing models. So the people at Anthropic I really appreciate their mission. But one of the things that they did very early on, in 2023, they invented a thing called Model Context Protocol, because everybody in the world that was doing AI was doing what our team is doing here, which is creating the way that the AI requests data from other systems.
So we were making custom connectors.
We were making custom connectors.
And a bunch of other people were making custom connectors.
Everybody in the world that did AI was doing their own custom connectors.
And then the Anthropic was people, we gotta,
there needs to be a standard. There needs to be a protocol.
I
didn't realize
MCP.
Anthropic was kind of
They invented MCP in late 2023. And at the end of 2023, there were like 15 MCPs. At the beginning of 2024, there were 200.
But many connectors. Just
a lot of people were writing connectors.
Okay.
Just like my team was writing connectors, other people were writing connectors. And when everybody kind of discovered the same thing, and they were doing what we're doing, but in their own way. And so what Anthropic introduced is not necessarily the way in which you interface with the data, but the way in which you give the AI access to the thing you've built that interfaces to the data. The protocol to get context to a model. Model Context Protocol.
Oh, so
That's what MCP
there's still like an API,
is.
right?
Sure, actually, that's usually the way it works. So there's the MCP client, which is Audition or VS Code or Copilot or whatever it is. So there's the client, which is the thing the user talks to. That's usually a chat interface. So there's the MCP client. Let's call that Audition, since we're Audition people.
Yeah.
Then there's the MCP server, and then there's the API. Typically, there's an API. So
and the MCP server is like the connector.
it sits in between the AI and the API.
So you're saying like I want to connect my Outlook mailbox to Audition.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So in that case, Audition would connect to an MCP server that knows how to talk to Outlook.
Got it.
And really what it knows how to do is say, I want to get the right information, filter down, and get that to the AI so the AI can tell me what to do next.
Got it. Interesting.
So
And is that it for the flow?
it can get more complicated than that because you can actually chain MCP servers. There's an infinite amount of complexity that can go in between the AI and all these other MCP servers. So the AI can call an MCP server, the MCP server can call another MCP server. That MCP server might have access to its own AI and do stuff. So there's this infinite complexity that can happen with MCP servers, especially as we go agentic.
You're granting a lot of permission to an MCP client then.
You're really granting a lot of permission to an MCP client.
So the MCP server could really like sit anywhere, right? You have, like, let's say we're connecting to I don't know, Salesforce, right?
Yes.
So you have Audition client, you have Salesforce,
Yep.
right? And then Salesforce could produce their own MCP server, right? And we're the MCP client.
Yep.
So Audition's connected to their MCP server. But then I've heard you talk about we could build the MCP server for the client if the third party doesn't have it. We just connect to their API. So I guess that's where I get a little bit confused. And you know, in the context of the API, right? I remember doing some training for a client a couple of weeks ago, and we have that slide that talks about all of our connectors, and then we say, hey, we prefer MCP and API, and the client got really confused. They're like, well, is it API or is it MCP? I'm like, well, it's whatever's available. And then the client's like, okay, I understand what an API is. Now help me understand where the MCP fits in the whole thing. But
So Audition has, we geniusly named it Generic because we thought we'd give it a better name later, but we have a connector called Generic, and it can connect the AI directly to any API. And it's great. You know, if you have something simple, like our common one that we test with is just the weather. There's a ton of free weather APIs out there, but there's weather APIs. You can just connect Audition to a generic weather API, and then you can say, hey, what's the weather today? And Audition will go to the API and request it and come back and give you the information. A weather API has a finite amount of data that it can return. It's pretty simple.
I think everyone knows the acronym API, but they really don't know what an API does. So it's just like pull requests, right?
It's just, an API is an application programming interface.
Yeah.
It's just a way for a program to talk to another program.
But there's a certain set of commands that you got to give the API.
So, well, this is fun because there's a lot of different kinds of APIs. So this could go pretty deep.
Got it.
But for the most part, on the internet, you have these things called RESTful APIs, which are just websites that sit there waiting for someone to ask them a question. So a weather API is just a website that's running, and when you could go yourself to an endpoint called get weather, and you pass it a zip code, and it'll return with, you know what a JSON object is, just like a datafied, and then it'll be a current weather report. So Audition can hit any API, and it will read if the API has documentation, because APIs can have documentation published as part of their specification.
Yeah.
And if it's good documentation, then the AI can get a reasonably good result. But a lot of times APIs are not well built, or they return a lot of information, or there's something about them that makes it difficult for the AI to get a spectacular result just with the AI talking directly to the API. And that's the reason that we put connectors in between, is because we found a lot of times, like I said with Jira, the API returns a lot of information. It was too much, especially back in 2023 when model context windows were really small. We really had to summarize the information that came back to the AI. Model context protocol services simply translate, usually, there's sometimes more work that happens, but what happens between the API and the AI.
Got it. I got a security question.
Sure.
Okay, so there's public MCPs
Yeah.
that you can connect to,
Sure.
but you're saying there is a security risk.
Sure.
And AuditionAI can connect to any MCP server. Is there some way to say
An
there's a
Audition-
vulnerability or?
An AuditionAI administrator, like a global administrator in AuditionAI, can connect to any MCP server. We have not yet had a client connect to an MCP server without asking us for the go-ahead first.
They ask you.
They
open a
usually
ticket.
ask us. They open a ticket and they say, is it safe to use this MCP server? I can see a world where these MCP servers and their evaluation, it becomes an entire market. I mean, there's an entire security industry around vetting other products that are out there. And right now we're just including it. It's a lot of work, but we're including it with the service. Like it's just included. We satisfy those requests, but
Yeah.
we're getting that backlog of MCP review because there's a lot of bad MCP servers out there. Fortunately, most of them are open source, so you can just see the source code for the MCP server on GitHub
Yeah.
and evaluate it and have some kind of an idea of, is this a good MCP server or a bad MCP server?
And what would make it bad is just a lack of security controls.
There's a couple of things. A lot of the MCP servers are not really designed to be secure. They're just designed to get stuff done. A lot of MCP servers are designed to run on a local, so you have your laptop here.
Yeah.
A lot of MCP servers are designed to be installed on your laptop and service only you, one person. So one MCP server for one person. And so that doesn't lend itself very well to an enterprise app like Outlook or Asana or some kind of a system where you want to have an MCP server running that a lot of people are connecting to. So those servers that run on your own machine are lacking any kind of awareness of multiple users.
Yeah.
And they simply operate in the context of your user account on your machine, which there's a lot of power to that.
Yeah.
The other downside of that is those MCP servers, a lot of them require that you be running a local MCP client. So like ChatGPT can run MCP servers like that, but only if you're running the local version of ChatGPT that runs on your Mac. And
But
then
ChatGPT's connectors,
Yeah.
I mean, those are MCP servers, like connect to your Gmail. Is that
I-
accurate?
I think they probably use model. I mean, we don't know. They haven't advertised how it's MCP is a specific protocol.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to talk to this service using this protocol. So
Yeah.
we don't know how ChatGPT connects to Google Drive. We don't know
Right.
what protocol they use
Right.
for that.
It's funny you say that because their biggest competitor is Anthropic, so it'd
For
be
sure.
interesting to see if they embrace their standards.
They've been hesitant.
Yeah.
I think they might
But
feel the way.
But I would think everyone who's in the AI space, right? Like you want to publicize that you're using MCP service, the best way to connect. So if
Yeah.
you're not saying you're using MCP, you're probably using API or doing something else or something a little bit less sophisticated, right?
Yeah. We all create our own bubble on, LinkedIn and other social media. I've only seen this proliferation of conversation about MCP in the last 6 months. So I was really interested when I originally looked at MCP in 2023. We didn't immediately adopt it as this is our approach.
Right.
Because it was new,
Yeah.
and I figured a lot of people would try to come up with their own standard,
Yeah.
and there would be a battle of the protocols,
Yeah.
and then one would win. And
You were surprised how quickly it.
I was surprised how slow actually. I mean, we're in 2025 now, and AI develops week to week. This has existed since 2023. It only became popular, from my perspective, in 2025. There was an entire year where it really dragged its feet, people picking a protocol. We didn't really decide on MCP as our actual specific protocol until this year. Just like it looks like everybody. And I think nobody else really tried to create a standard. I think that's the reason. Microsoft kind of tried. Microsoft has a thing called kernel memory, and OpenAI had a standard.
Yeah.
Microsoft and OpenAI both seem to have folded and adopted the MCP model context protocol as the standard.
What made you decide to adopt it?
It's a good approach. It's really simple. I can build an MCP server in 10 minutes. Like, it's very, very easy. An MCP server is just a definition. You can have just a configuration file that is between you and the API, or the AI and the API, and that can be very effective. An MCP server does not need to be inherently complicated, so it's a very simple concept that also is very expandable. Like, it's a foundation on which you can build some really powerful stuff. Like our Edgar connector. Edgar is a suite of things. It's not just API. There are endpoints on Edgar where you download, large index databases, 15, 20 gigabyte files. There's a collection of things that you need to do to interface with to Edgar, and our server handles all of those. So it's very much, it's thousands of lines of code that operate in MCP using the model context protocol in order to let the AI interface with Edgar.
So why would a company, like one of the companies that I'm establishing the partnership with them so our clients can connect to their data, and they've been working on MCP server for several months. And they said, we have a beta with 2 clients, and then we're going to release it hopefully by the end of the year. Right? You talked about building an MCP server in 10 minutes. Right? Why would someone take so long to build an MCP server? Like, what's all the thoughtfulness they'd want to put into it to make it really, really good versus, and I'm saying in 10 minutes you couldn't crank something out that's amazing, but a larger company really putting a lot of thought into MCP, what are the pieces that they're thinking about?
I know the provider you're talking about, and they're a data provider.
Right.
They have a lot of data,
right,
and data is complicated. So even telling the AI what's available, giving it a list of services and fields might exceed the context window. So how do you translate a user request into a series of conversations that the AI then has with the API so that the user ends up with the data that they're looking for? So if the user says, I want the last price for Tesla, that's really easy. You have an API endpoint that you just convert whatever the user asks for to a ticker, to a last price request. That's a tiny request. You can do that direct to the API. That works. But then what if you said, I need a list of competitors where their earnings have all filed a similar progression over the last 12 months that also see a drop in something in the last week. Right. That's a complicated request, and the AI is going to have to do stuff to accomplish that. So how do you give the AI access to all of the different data points it needs to effectively answer that question? And not just effectively, but answer it in a way that the user is not going to feel like the AI has hallucinated or given them stupid data. It's very important in this case, especially with this provider, that the data be very, very good data. And that their outcomes to the user be what they expect. And then also probably fast. The users might be sensitive to the AI working in circles for a long time to figure out a good answer.
Right. So speed, quality outcome, and just thoroughness.
So what we're seeing a lot more of is the MCPs themselves are implementing an agentic workload. So, for example, you ask a question about a very large data set, and the MCP has its own AI capabilities to understand the question, to figure out what are the data sources that might be useful for this, and then to start chunking through, reading chunks of data. I'm going to read the first 3 pages of this document, the next 3 pages, the next 3 pages, and there's 1,000 documents. And it has to, so maybe it spawns a bunch of AIs that all start doing the same thing on a bunch of documents. It's not, I don't think, as much about the MCP server itself as the strategy of how do I turn this human request into figuring out even what is the right function to get, or a collection of functions to get the data.
Right, so not all MCP servers are created equal.
Oh, that is for sure. Yeah. That 15-minute MCP might work great for the weather API,
Right, yeah.
but it would be terrible for your, I don't know, your local database with your security master. It needs,
More.
more thoughtfulness. Yeah. So definitely it's a matter of try, fail, try, succeed. It's very much that. It's constantly asking questions, watching how the MCP is typically, deterministic code. So watching how that does its work and what the data that it requests and gets and gives to the AI, and if the outcome is good, and then doing that over and over and over again until you consistently get a very, very good, high quality result. So,
Got it.
The third grade explanation. User asks a question.
yep,
The MCP is really going to interpret that
that's it.
the best that it can
Mhm.
by referencing the software or whatever it is it's pointing
The
to.
files, the data, the APIs, whatever it is, that's what the MCP is about. Yeah.
That's it.
You and I
that's
are
the
going
purpose.
tomorrow night to Boston
Yeah.
to sit at a leadership dinner
Yeah.
about MCP.
Oh, is that what it's about?
That is the topic of conversation. It's AI, and a third of the conversation is going to be MCP and their risk to your enterprise. Because whether or not people realize it or not, their users are probably using MCP servers.
Yeah.
And just like Chrome extensions, they're very hard to track down.
Yeah.
It's really, really easy to use an MCP server and bypass your enterprise controls right now.
Yeah.
It's exceptionally easy to do that.
Oh, this timing is perfect.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you're an IT manager or a CISO or even a CCO,
Yeah.
the time is now to start investigating MCP. Again, beginning of the year, 1,000 MCP servers. Today, over 15,000. By the end of the year, there will be tens of thousands of MCP servers.
Yeah.
They have proliferated. They are very available. There are many of them. It's not just the MCP server itself, but they will also become an avenue of attack. So
Yeah.
now is the time to start really paying attention to the MCP world, especially just from a compliance and a cybersecurity standpoint.
I hate to do a shameless plug,
Sure,
but it's all the more reason to use a solution like AuditionAI.
sure.
Because that's a surefire way to control MCP usage.
Yeah, regular users can't just use MCP servers with AuditionAI. So you can lock down your users' ability to use, local apps,
Yeah.
still give them Audition, still give them access to MCP,
Yeah.
but do it in a way where not just control it, but see what users are doing with it.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm not a CISO, right? I'm not a security expert, but I talk to a lot of non-technical people at our clients, right? Compliance officers and so forth. Like, what's the one thing, like a chief compliance officer, right? Some of them aren't very technical. And, in light of what we're talking about here, what's the one thing that would keep them up at night, knowing about something about MCP servers that they should be worried about, something that should be on their checklist or something they should be focused on when they hear MCP come up, something they should think about evaluating or asking the first question about something?
I think the main risk with MCP is that just like everything with AI, people are driven by that cool new thing that can save them time or get something done. So they're going to be very likely to just bypass all of their normal safeguards and say, this MCP server will help me to accomplish that thing by just asking the AI a question, and they're just gonna click yes to install. They're not gonna go through a process. So the thing that should keep them up at night is shadow IT. It is making sure that your users understand that these things are such a high risk that it's very much worth following the company policy of going through a review process. I think that the list of what needs to be reviewed is probably more than we have time for on this thing.
Right.
But it's,
But if they're using a platform like Audition, they're mitigating the risk, that internal risk. What's the external risk, right? If if Audition's connecting to another MCP server, like what are the, you're mentioning clients are often asking us now about what do you think of this MCP server we're connecting to? What's like a red flag or something they should be thinking about as we connect out to something else, and like what's maybe one risk that might be present?
Sure. There's a couple of things. Number one, if they don't implement some sort of a real security architecture like OAuth. We see a lot of MCP servers going live that are either no authentication, which is obviously a little weird, or they use a really basic, simple kind of authentication that all of your users represent as just one identity, not each person representing as themselves. So true, delegated access, OAuth, something like that.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. Number two, it's that there is this mad rush to get an MCP server out there, and they're not taking the months that it takes to do it thoughtfully.
Right.
So they're just doing something really quick.
Yeah.
And so we like to see MCP servers where it's open source, available on GitHub or something like that for community review. Like that's a good thing to see. But if not, then it comes from somebody that's trusted. So an official MCP server from a trusted company, we're going to tend to, as long as they implement, they say we're implementing good authentication practices and authorization and that kind of thing. But it's a new space, so there's going to be problems. People are going to discover bugs and security flaws and all of that kind of thing. That's going to happen.
Man,
it is inevitable. Yeah.
Every time I think I know a lot about something, you proved me wrong. You're always teaching me something, Ben.
We're going to meet a guy tomorrow that is the MCP expert at a cybersecurity company.
Oh, really?
And his level of knowledge about the security layer in MCP definitely puts my knowledge to the test. I'm really excited to hear from him. So.
Wow, that's awesome. I think that concludes MCPs, demystifying what it is, how it works, security vulnerabilities, and just the trends.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
AuditionAI, audition-ai.com. You should check it out. Thanks, guys.